Imagine standing in an abandoned sanatorium on the Berkshire Hills, where the air is thick with the smell of mold and ozone, and broken glass from shattered lamps crunches underfoot, when suddenly you find a battered box of audio cassettes with an inscription scrawled in a trembling hand. Session 47. Do not listen. You insert the first cassette into an old tape recorder, and from the speakers comes the low hum of a generator, interrupted by a man's groans as his voice shifts into speech in a language unlike any you've ever heard. Words flowing like liquid darkness, seeping into your mind, making your heart pound in sync with the rising horror. Then the screams begin, sharp and primal, cut off by a sudden burst of static noise that lasts an eternity, and you realize these recordings aren't just echoes of the past. They're alive. They're calling you to join. It all started in those gray autumn days of 1987, when I, Alex Harper, an amateur historian from Massachusetts, decided to explore abandoned psychiatric clinics in New England for my podcast about forgotten corners of American medicine. The Berkshire Hills, this labyrinth of dense forests and steep slopes in the western part of the state, always drew me in with their ominous aura. Here, in the shadow of Mount Greylock, a private sanatorium called Hillside Sanatorium opened in the 1920s, a place where wealthy families sent their troubled relatives for treatment of nervous disorders. The clinic shut down in 1973 after a scandal involving experimental methods, but official records were destroyed, leaving only rumors of shock therapy that supposedly healed not just the mind, but summoned something else. I parked my old pickup by the rusted fence, corroded from decades of rain and snow, and, armed with a flashlight, crowbar, and backpack, climbed over the chain leading to the main building. A massive Victorian structure with broken windows, where wind howled through the cracks like the breath of a dying giant. Inside reigned absolute silence, broken only by my heavy breathing and water droplets falling from the ceiling into puddles on the cracked linoleum. I wandered the corridors, where walls were covered in peeling paint the color of pale bile, and patient room doors still bore numbers etched by time. Ward 12, Isolation B. In the basement, down a creaking staircase saturated with the smell of dampness and something metallic, like rusty blood, I stumbled upon a room crammed with dusty cabinets of medical equipment, rusted electrodes, jars with yellowed labels, sedative solutions, and in the corner, a cardboard box sealed with faded tape. Scratched on the lid was Personal Archive of Dr. Eldritch, 1968 to 1972, and inside lay dozens of audio cassettes labeled with session numbers: Session 23, Session 39, Session 47, Critical. My hands trembled as I picked up the first one. The cassette felt warm to the touch, as if fresh from a pocket despite the basement chill, and I felt a slight shiver run down my spine, as if someone was watching me from the shadows. Back at my motel in Pittsfield that night, I connected the cassette to an old tape deck I'd bought at a flea market specifically for such finds and hit play. First came the deep hum of the electroshock generator, low and vibrating, penetrating the chest like a bass drum in an empty room. Then Dr. Eldritch's voice, dry and methodical like a watchmaker dismantling a mechanism. Session 47. Patient, John Doe, 42 years old, brought from Boston with diagnosis catatonic schizophrenia. Refusal to eat, delusions of voices from cracks. Applying standard protocol, 120 volts, 0.3 seconds. The rustle of electrodes attaching to temples, the wet sound of lips whispering a prayer, and suddenly, the patient's voice, hoarse and broken but clear, words in a language I'd never heard, fluid syllables like distorted Latin mixed with guttural clicks, as if spoken with teeth rather than tongue. Tharl vesh, NGHFD Drachful, Wyinga. He repeated, and each syllable echoed in my head, making my temples clench in a vice. I replayed the recording over and over, trying to identify the language, Googled fragments, compared with African dialects, ancient Sumerian texts, even Eskimo idioms, but nothing. Linguists from the university, whom I sent the audio to, replied after a week. Unknown language, possibly artificial or heavily distorted. But the real horror began at the 3-minute mark. The patient suddenly screamed. Inhumanly, the scream was multi-layered, like a chorus of voices from the depths of a well, echoing in the bones, full of pain and triumph at once, followed by the sharp crack of electroshock, the body convulsing, judging by the sounds of straps creaking on the bed. The screams intensified, turning into a torrent of the same unknown words, accelerating like a whirlwind, and abruptly cut off by static noise. Not ordinary hiss, but thick, oily crackling, in which whispers and laughter could be discerned, distorted by interference, as if someone else had joined the recording. The noise lasted a minute, 2, 3, until the cassette ended, leaving me drenched in sweat, heart pounding wildly, in a room where the light bulb flickered in sync with that crackle. The next day, obsessed with finding more, I returned to the sanatorium. The cassette box felt heavier than yesterday, as if filled with lead, and the basement air had thickened, saturated with ozone from an invisible discharge. I listened to the cassettes one after another in my car parked by the fence, and with each session, the picture came together. Dr. Eldritch wasn't just experimenting with shock, but with awakening suppressed memories. Believing madness was a door to other realities. The patients, all anonymous, John does, spoke the same language before the shock, their screams cut off by the same noise. Session 23. A man mutters about cracks in the Berkshire Hills from which blackness seeps. Session 39. A woman whispers Yog-Sothoth, a name I recognized from Lovecraft's occult texts, but pronounced with authentic, primal intonation. And in session 47, the screams peaked. The patient shouted phrases that seemed like commands, invocations, and in the static noise, I began to discern English words woven into the chaos. They're coming. Through the noise. Listen. That night in the motel, I couldn't sleep. The static noise from the player echoed in my head, preventing even a doze, and I caught myself mumbling those syllables, not knowing why. In the morning, determined to get to the truth, I contacted a local historian who told me about Dr. Eldritch, an eccentric psychiatrist studying Mohawk Indian folklore from the pre-colonial hills, and their legends of underground paths, cracks in rocks from which ancestors' voices or demons emanate. Eldritch allegedly recorded sessions to reach these voices through patients' minds, using shock as the key. But in 1972, he vanished, leaving only these cassettes, and the sanatorium closed after staff complaints of strange noises from the basement at night. I returned to the clinic with a recorder, descended to the basement, and played session 47 at full volume. The generator hum filled the space. The patient's words echoed off the walls, and suddenly the static noise materialized. From the old electroshock machine connected to a generator I'd accidentally activated, came that same crackle, alive and pulsating, and the walls trembled.